We heard about sanctity of contracts when it comes to thermal projects being given additional revenue or compensated for their losses. Yeah, and in terms of hydropower, I think it's always been an orphan, and more so now there is a challenge with which is coming up from solar sector. Solar is picking up in leaps and bounds, not only in India but in other parts of the world, and it's gaining momentum. And because of which the competitiveness of solar is increasing, whereas the hydro is going against grid parity. Probably soon, unless you give us some sort of additional support, hydro will not be viable in itself. So I'll just briefly touch upon the private sector performance, because they took over since last 6-7 years the burden of state and central, which were predominantly loaded with hydro. And you will see that presently the hydro generation has different numbers, 16% almost, as compared to the total capacity of 260,000 megawatt. 90,000 megawatt capacity is still untapped. Private sector, almost 40 to 45,000 has been awarded to private sector. Almost 2,700 megawatt has been commissioned by this private sector. And in terms of what the projects are under construction, you see around 34% of the projects in construction is with private sector. You see, primarily for India, and we have talked about it, in terms of the fuel risk, availability, pricing, dependency on imported fuel. You talk about dollar dependency, your import bills. In all such cases, certainly hydro is the solution. Most of the markets world across, and you would be surprised to know that 55 countries in the world are actually having the maximum generation from hydro projects, which with almost 99% in Mozambique and 96% Norway. Their power generation is through hydro projects. And Statkraft, which I come from, has more than 18,000 megawatt, 99%, and Norway 96% of their generation. So of course, the leader at the moment is China with more than 250 gigs of hydropower, followed by Brazil, Canada, and I think it's US. But India could have been, or let's say the India and the contiguous country, Nepal and Bhutan together, could have contributed now with a potential of more than 200,000 megawatts or 200 gigs. So hydro is, the solution to be self-dependent in terms of equipment, in terms of manpower, in terms of technology. We have it all in India, and you could be self-sufficient and self-reliant, and the fuel is available for perpetuity. So it fails anybody's imagination why we are not tapping this potential which we have, whereas the other countries have increased in per capita energy as well as per capita income by tapping hydro potential as the first thing to tap onto. So in the private sector, you see there are typically three players, JP having 1700 megawatt, Tata Power 447, but these are old plants, and Bhilwara and Statkraft, that is us, together with 278 megawatt of operational capacity. But 41,000 megawatt is still to be taken up for construction. Primarily Arunachal is the major area where almost 33,000 megawatt has been awarded, but nothing has been taken up for construction. And second is Himachal with 3,600 megawatts. These you see on the graph on the figure there, the green dots. Most of the projects in the private sector, around 7 of them are under construction in Sikkim, and in Himachal around 3, and same is in Uttarakhand. So barely around 10 to 12 projects or 13 projects are under construction in the private sector. Rest of the projects are in various stages of development. And when we say development, it's it could be on the pre-feasibility or feasibility stage.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
These projects, they've been all project financed?
Yeah, most of the projects are through project finance.
And PPAs assigned?
Not all of them. Primarily, some of them.
So there'll be recourse to their balance sheets in case the PPAs are not signed?
Yeah, so they have partial recourse.
And what would be the typical per megawatt cost?
You know, all these projects were conceived in 2006, 7 and onwards. From that time onwards, you would see the inflation has been extremely high, and together with it, the financing has gone up. I mean, there was RBI increased the rates for the lending rates and all. So they were conceived at, let's say, 5 to 7 crores per megawatt, but they will end up in 9 to 13 crores per megawatt. That's the kind of challenge they have.
Moreover, what is the tenure of finance? What is the length of the financing?
It would be around 15 years.
So you have to pay back, let's say on a higher side, 13 crores in 15 years. The fixed charge will be very high.
That's the challenge, because they become then unviable.
So basically what you need to do is, as a recommendation from this conference, since you are a member, you should push for long-term financing.
Yeah, I mean, looking at somebody said during the discussions that we can have international financing, but the international financings are short tenors. The longest door-to-door we get it in India. That's our experience. I mean, one of the longest, we can even get 20 years plus. But that's one-off cases. But if it's available through certain policy, recommendation, that will be really nice to have. But these projects, for instance, with a skewed PPA terms that it used to be at those times, which was not really cost plus, they were on a fixed PPA, let's say, and they are all in the courts because they had cost and time overruns and trying to get the.
They are all after the Electricity Act, right? So they come under 62.
They don't come under 62, but there was this cost plus regime for hydro with 15.5% return on
62.
equity. Yeah.
And last year we recommended an extension of the sunset clause for hydro. So
yeah. Probably, but when it came to discoms, they actually went in for a cost plus PPA. Rather, it was more or less a fixed kind of a PPA. The final agreements which most of these developers had to sign under compulsion of getting a financial closure at those points in time, and probably they gave in, is a fixed PPA. So I can name a couple of at least 3-4 projects which had almost a fixed PPA without escalation in some cases, and also sometimes with escalation. But they are going back, and they are to the APTEL now for revisions, or the state electricity.
So what are the grounds of your appeal in APTEL?
They have first asked the SERCs to revise it. If they don't,
what are your grounds in SERC? Why should the regulator revise it? What's the reason?
The cost and time overruns primarily.
So
the geological risks.
No, you see, the PFC and REC both are giving 20 years funding for the hydro projects. Where is the problem? And they have not turned back any single proposal which was viable.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, and that's what is available from PFC and REC. You're right, absolutely.
And the rates are competitive.
The banks are willing to give much more competitive rates, but the tenors are short, so you have to decide, which ones you want to go with.
No, but you see, if your tenor is short, your recovery is not feasible. You have to see the tenure with reference to the recovery, otherwise the project will collapse.
Of course, some of these private players do tend to consider a very tight budget then in order to get a financial closure.
No, I'm sure. We don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of your projects, but maybe there's a solution to what you are saying by asking the government, before you go before the Regulatory Commission, or asking the Regulatory Commission for a direction, saying that change your lender. If you are able to get financing for 25 years versus 15 years, and you are running at 10 to 12 crores of fixed cost, the chances of your project being successful and paying you back some money is much higher.
This is true, but normally a private developer would end up, once the construction risk is over, he would refi it once it gets into operation. So initially, even if he has a 15 years door-to-door tenor, it's okay. He will refi it once it's in operation and
What is refi?
refinance.
Refinance.
No, you see, PFC, REC, both from 2007 onwards have been funding 20 years and 25 years, door-to-door maturity.
Sir, वो नहीं लेना चाह रहा तो अब जबरदस्ती
नहीं लेना चाह रहा बात दूसरी. Yes.
He's saying, what he's saying is, he wanted to move quickly, so he's building the project. Once it's built, he'll refinance it. He'll get cheaper finance because the risk has gone down. Construction risk is over. ठीक है, fair enough.
So I think challenges is well known, and Mr. Madan already clarified one of them, and the foremost and the biggest is the bad infrastructure and road condition. This includes construction power as well, and a power evacuation facility. Construction power specifically, I mean, may require DG sets, but the kind of terrains these projects are, the nearest fuel station is almost 200 kilometers away, and that's not a viable solution if you have to build a project on DG sets. So that's one thing. Of course, there are policies wherein like Himachal has given mini hydro for a construction power, allocation of mini hydro for a construction power. But then that also needs to be built prior to, and that adds on to the timeline of the project.
Rahul, one quick question. Do you have any issues on transmission and evacuation of your power?
No, not really.
Who's building the line?
It will be PGCIL.
So from your bus bar till PGCIL, you're sorted.
We will have to apply for it, but it will be sorted. Yes.
And what about the land acquisition and forest clearances on the way?
The
Will that not delay your project?
Land acquisition, most of the 99% is forest land, so it's the forest clearance and environment clearance issue. So, I mean, the other aspect is, of course, from the risk point of view.
One sec, hold on. Yes.
Sorry to intervene. The many issues are there which are being highlighted here. They are not right. For example, people are quoting wrong hydrothermal ratio, as if we are not encouraging hydro. We always include a large number
एक
of
रिक्वेस्ट, इनको ये खत्म कर लेने दो सर, फिर कोई Q&A में करते हैं. इनका स्पेसिफिक है तो पूछ लो, फिर बाद में जनरल. I agree with you. I want those points to come in. We'll get done. I'll give. No issue.
The other important aspect which would like to highlight is these 40,000 megawatt of capacity is in the hands of private sector. Some of them is awarded through an MOU route. Some state has given through an international competitive bidding, but there is a restriction on change of ownership. So if change of ownership, some restricted from 6 months after COD, some doesn't define it, but it just says you cannot sell the project, and there is no even sunset clause in those implementation agreements which have been signed with the private companies. So what happens is, there could be a situation where there is a change of strategy of the company, there is a financial upheaval because of which the company cannot conceive the project anymore, or they want to change, in terms of the focus from hydro to thermal if the policies are favorable or like otherwise. But in absence of any M&A policy, it's not possible for anyone to do it. And all of these projects get into, or let's say they are stuck up. So all I wanted to say with this particular slide was the risk reward is not what it should be. It's higher risk for a hydro projects, but the rewards are not commensurate to the risk. This I've already covered basically on the infrastructure. Specifically when we talk of infrastructure, we are doing a project in Himachal where almost 250 kilometers of the road is with one side of mountain and the other side of a deep valley, and the road width is 7 meters maximum. The BRO is responsible. The projects have been awarded since last 8 years, and they have the money, but they haven't completed any widening or completion of these roads. Highlighted several times to Ministry of Power since last 2.5, 3 years, and the state government and the BRO. But this is 3,000 megawatt in this valley. If 250 kilometers of road is completed, all 3,000 can come up very quickly. But it's not happening just because of the road. So those are the typical
So
challenges.
why don't you build the road? Why don't you build the road and put in a project cost?
It's going to be extremely tough to finance that 250 kilometers of
No,
road.
there are parts of Bangalore which are being built by private sector now since government is not coming forward.
See,
Roads.
it would be like के चले थे चार धाम के लिए and you started doing something
वो तो
else.
होता है, पावर सेक्टर में वही तो होता है. Exactly, I do में होता है.
So-
Okay, listen, can you conclude? But before you
Yeah.
conclude, one question. You said you can't transfer your project. What happens if you die?
The developer has been awarded the project. There is an
Yeah,
MOU.
he died. Now what happens?
The project doesn't die. I mean, the company doesn't die.
Oh, the company. So therefore, you can transfer by dying.
No. No.
The PPA says you can never transfer the project.
No, PPA, no. Implementation.
Implementation agreement.
Yeah.
You just can't transfer.
You just can't transfer. It doesn't define, and the lawyers have debated several times on it. But it's a chance game. You try it. For instance, the 17 or let's say the 1300 megawatt Taka deal, the Chief Minister Himachal Pradesh had a clear objection with this particular deal, whereas the clause doesn't require approval of the state government after 6 months of COD. So despite that situation, change of ownership was blocked in that particular case. But in case of approvals and clearances, I really appreciate what Mr. Taneja said in the morning, that they're planning for a PMCM sort of a energy council, which is extremely necessary, especially for hydro projects where some of the subjects are state subjects, some of the subjects, and especially environment and forest ministries are the files go at the central ministry level, and therefore it's important that these approvals and clearances would be expedited if there is such kind of a state versus center or PMCM energy council. And so, I mean,
Why don't you skip that slide?
here.
Let's talk about
Change
it.
of ownership, yeah.
Yeah.
So primarily, you see the change of ownership in the implementation agreement in most of the hydro states are restrictive or ambiguous, as I said. In case of Uttarakhand,
But then why do you accept them here? I don't understand.
this has been done by the private developers in the past. It's not we are trying to. If we want to acquire a project, we are unable to acquire a project. We want to invest in India as StatCraft. We want to grow
Okay.
in-
So you basically are saying you want to acquire projects, but you can't because they can't sell it to you.
That's right.
Oh.
So, it's stuck. Those projects are stuck. No more funding is happening in those projects. People have demobilized from the site as well. And therefore, it's not in the interest of the state. And moreover, there is an intellectual property there. Generally, the state expects that if the private developer is not doing anything, then they should surrender it back to the state. But the private developer has put in money. There is an intellectual property, which means some progress has happened. He wouldn't like to do that, so he will sit on it. The state doesn't get its free power, because that's what is the ultimate aim of the state, to get the free power when it's commissioned, and the project gets delayed. And if the state wants to, let's say, cancel the license, one of the topics, the private developer will go to the court.
Rahul, I've understood. This is a very important point, but we can't discuss it in public. Why they don't want you to sell to somebody else? Continue. Please conclude. Huh?
So I think there's a risk reward which shall be reviewed. Probably hydro purchase obligation is one such thing which will enable for the cost plus regime to operate, because if you are not viable, probably no distribution company is going to buy you, and that's one aspect. And the other important aspect which we believe is the state should take more like a role of a project management role or an enabler to clear the bottlenecks of a private developer. It's given the responsibility to a private developer without any kind of a support. Or
I'm sorry, I'm lost. Who should take this role?
State.
The state government should do it.
Yeah.
Because they're getting free power from you.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, it's in their interest also. And of course, evolving a single window clearance. The other aspect is some of the states went in for a free power based bidding, and that's not a pass through in the cost plus regime. So that has to be also looked into. And finally, the M&A policy, that needs to be defined, a clear M&A policy enabling certain developers to exit.
What's wrong with the M&A policy?
There is none.
So then you're happy, you're not barred from M&Aing. If there's nothing in the law which stops you from M&A,
No, I mean, these are restrictive implementation agreements.
oh, because of the implement.
So possibly, if I can just add a line to this, I think that's where the transaction between Reliance Power and Jayaprakash happened last weekend. So it is possibly more has to do with an FDI inflow rather than a promoter, an
No, I
Indian promoter
understood. He's
changing the
looking
hands.
at it from an international investor
Yeah.
wanting to invest in these projects which cannot be transferred because of the implementation agreement. Bottom line here is somebody has to die and then he can will it to somebody else to get the project transferred, but nobody wants to die. Exact bottom line? Okay. Thanks, Rahul, for a
you very
fantastic
much.
presentation. It's an eye-opener.
Thank you.